In a world where physical perfection is demanded from elite warriors, where military precision requires flawless vision, and where the deadliest weapons are reserved for the most capable hands, one woman shattered every assumption about what it means to be qualified. This isn't just another story about overcoming odds. This is about the moment when a Navy SEAL instructor, trained to spot weakness, eliminate doubt, and push human limits, handed the world's most powerful sniper rifle to someone everyone else had written off. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle weighs 30 pounds and fires bullets that can pierce through engine blocks from over a mile away. It's not a weapon you give to someone as a gesture of kindness. It's a tool you entrust only to those who've proven they can handle its devastating power. But sometimes, the most unlikely person walks into your world wearing their scars like armor, carrying their limitations like secret weapons, and demanding nothing more than the chance to prove that strength isn't always what you think it looks like. What happened next didn't just change one woman's life. It revolutionized how an entire military community understood the true meaning of capability, precision, and heart. This is that story. The morning sun cast long shadows across the Coronado Naval Base shooting range as Master Chief Petty Officer Marcus Rodriguez checked his watch for the third time. The advanced marksmanship training session was scheduled to begin in 15 minutes, and his roster showed 23 elite military personnel signed up for the intensive 3-day course. 22 had already checked in, their credentials impressive enough to make any instructor proud. Navy SEALs, Marine snipers, Army Rangers, and Coast Guard tactical units. All battle-tested warriors seeking to refine their long-range shooting skills with some of the military's most sophisticated weapons. The 23rd name on his list belonged to someone he'd never heard of, Staff Sergeant Sarah Chun, Army National Guard. Her paperwork indicated she'd served 2 tours in Afghanistan. But beyond that, Rodriguez knew nothing about her background. What puzzled him wasn't her unit assignment. National Guard soldiers occasionally earned spots in specialized training programs, but rather the unusual notation in her medical file that he'd glimpsed during the preliminary review. The notation was brief, clinical, and concerning: monocular vision, left eye. Rodriguez had been training military marksmen for over 15 years. He'd worked with soldiers who'd overcome significant injuries, warriors who'd adapted to prosthetics, and fighters who'd pushed through pain that would cripple ordinary civilians. But he'd never trained a one-eyed sniper. The physics alone seemed problematic: depth perception, target acquisition, range estimation, all critical skills that typically required binocular vision. He'd spent the previous evening reviewing her application, wondering if there had been some administrative error. The sound of gravel crunching under boots drew his attention to the parking area. A figure emerged from a dust-covered pickup truck, moving with the purposeful stride of someone accustomed to military environments. As she approached, Rodriguez could see she was smaller than most of the other participants, perhaps 5 feet 6 inches tall with a compact, athletic build. Her dark hair was pulled back in a regulation bun, and she wore standard Army combat uniforms with the understated professionalism that marked experienced soldiers. But it was the black eye patch covering her left eye that immediately commanded attention. Unlike the temporary medical patches he'd seen on soldiers recovering from injuries, this one appeared permanent, custom-fitted, and worn with the kind of unconscious comfort that spoke of long adaptation. She carried her gear bag with practiced efficiency, moving across the uneven ground without the hesitation that might be expected from someone with compromised vision. Rodriguez walked forward to meet her, extending his hand in greeting. "Staff Sergeant Chun, I'm Master Chief Rodriguez. Welcome to the Advanced Marksmanship Program." Her handshake was firm, direct, and accompanied by steady eye contact from her remaining eye. "Thank you, Master Chief. I'm looking forward to the training." Her voice carried no trace of uncertainty or defensiveness, no acknowledgement that her presence here might be considered unusual. "I have to ask," Rodriguez said, choosing his words carefully, "are you comfortable with all aspects of this program? We'll be working with some pretty sophisticated equipment, and the shooting distances can be challenging even for marksmen with full vision." Sarah's expression didn't change, but something in her posture suggested this wasn't the first time she'd faced such questions. "I understand your concerns, Master Chief. My shooting scores qualified me for this program. I'm here to learn whatever you're teaching. Before Rodriguez could respond further, the sound of multiple vehicles arriving announced the presence of his other students. SEALs emerged from their transport vehicles with the quiet confidence that marked elite special operations personnel. Their gear was pristine, their movements economical, and their bearing unmistakably professional. Among them was Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan, a SEAL sniper instructor whom Rodriguez had worked with on previous training programs. Sullivan approached the group, nodding to Rodriguez before his gaze settled on Sarah. His eyes immediately focused on the eye patch, and Rodriguez could see the questions forming in his expression. This was exactly what Rodriguez had been concerned about, not malicious intent, but the natural skepticism that arose when established expectations were challenged. Interesting roster this time, Sullivan commented quietly to Rodriguez as the group began assembling their equipment. His tone was neutral, but the implication was clear. The other participants had begun setting up their personal weapons and gear, creating the familiar organized chaos of experienced military personnel preparing for training. Sarah found a space among them and began unpacking her equipment with methodical precision. Her rifle case contained a standard Army M110 semi-automatic sniper system, well-maintained and bearing the subtle modifications that experienced marksmen made to optimize their weapons for their specific shooting style. As she assembled her rifle, Rodriguez noticed something remarkable. Her movements were not just competent, they were fluid, practiced, and efficient in a way that spoke of countless hours of repetition. She adjusted the scope mounting with the kind of subtle precision that came only from deep familiarity with the equipment. When she performed the routine safety checks, her single eye moved across the weapon with systematic thoroughness, missing nothing. The morning briefing began with Rodriguez explaining the program structure. 3 days of progressively challenging shooting scenarios, starting with precision shots at known distances and advancing to complex tactical situations involving unknown ranges, wind calculations, and time pressure. The final day would culminate in qualification shoots with the Barrett M82.50 caliber rifle, a weapon system that separated true marksmen from merely competent shooters. The Barrett .50 is not forgiving, Rodriguez explained to the assembled group. It weighs 30 pounds, generates massive recoil, and demands perfect form and mental discipline. The ammunition costs $12 per round, so every shot counts. More importantly, this weapon system is designed for extreme long-range precision. We're talking about hitting targets at distances where atmospheric conditions, Earth's rotation, and minute equipment variations all become significant factors. He paused, scanning the faces before him. Every person in the group had extensive shooting experience, but the Barrett represented a significant step up in complexity and power. Not everyone who starts this program will qualify on the .50 caliber system. There's no shame in that. It's simply a matter of matching the right shooter to the right weapon system. Sarah listened to the briefing with the same focused attention as the others, taking notes when appropriate, but never appearing anxious or uncertain. When Rodriguez called for questions, she remained silent, but her body language suggested complete engagement with the material. The first shooting exercise began with precision shots at 600 yards, a distance that allowed skilled marksmen to demonstrate their fundamental techniques while providing instructors with baseline performance measurements. Each participant would fire 5 shots at a target barely visible to the naked eye, aiming for a scoring zone roughly the size of a dinner plate. Rodriguez positioned himself behind the firing line with spotting scopes and range-finding equipment, ready to provide immediate feedback on each shot. The SEALs and Marines took their positions with practiced confidence, settling into shooting positions that reflected years of training and field experience. The distinctive sounds of bolt-action rifles chambering rounds echoed across the range as the first shooters prepared to engage their targets. Sarah took her position at the far end of the firing line, setting up her equipment with the same methodical approach she'd shown earlier. She adjusted her shooting mat, positioned her rifle, and began the careful process of settling into a stable shooting position. Rodriguez watched through his spotting scope as she made the subtle adjustments that experienced marksmen use to achieve perfect stability. What struck him immediately was the way she handled the visual challenges of her situation. Instead of attempting to compensate for her missing eye, She seemed to have developed shooting techniques that maximized the capabilities of her remaining vision. Her head position was slightly different from the textbook examples, optimized for her specific situation rather than conforming to standard techniques designed for binocular vision. The first round of firing began with Lieutenant Commander Sullivan taking the lead shot. His bullet struck the target center mass, earning approving nods from the other participants. The Marines and Army Rangers followed, each delivering respectable accuracy that reflected their training and experience. The scores were solid, professional, and exactly what Rodriguez had expected from this caliber of military marksman. When Sarah's turn came, a subtle quiet settled over the firing line. The other participants weren't being disrespectful, but their attention was clearly focused on how she would perform. Rodriguez positioned his spotting scope carefully, preparing to provide the same objective feedback he gave every student regardless of their background or circumstances. Sarah's pre-shot routine was longer than most, involving what appeared to be additional target verification steps. She spent extra time ensuring her scope alignment and confirming her range estimation. When she finally settled into her final shooting position, her breathing became controlled and rhythmic in the manner of an experienced marksman entering the focused mental state required for precision shooting. The crack of her rifle cut through the morning air with the same authority as the previous shots. Through his spotting scope, Rodriguez immediately saw the impact point on the target. The bullet had struck well within the scoring zone, not quite center but with accuracy that demonstrated genuine shooting skill. "Good shot, Chun," Rodriguez called out, marking her score on his record sheet. Solid fundamentals. The acknowledgement was professional and appropriate, but Rodriguez was already thinking ahead to the more challenging exercises that would follow. The 600-yard shots were just the beginning. As the distances increased and the environmental factors became more complex, the challenges would multiply exponentially. The real test would come when atmospheric conditions became significant factors, when tiny errors in calculation or technique would be magnified into complete misses. But Sarah had passed the first test. She could shoot. Whether she could adapt to the increasingly demanding requirements of long-range precision marksmanship remained to be seen. But she had earned her place among these experienced warriors through demonstrated competence rather than administrative accident. The morning continued with additional rounds at varying distances, each exercise designed to test different aspects of marksmanship skill. Wind reading, range estimation, position shooting, and time pressure scenarios all played their part in building a comprehensive picture of each participant's capabilities and limitations. As the sun climbed higher and the day grew warmer, Rodriguez noticed something interesting developing among the group. The initial curiosity about Sarah's presence was being replaced by professional respect earned through consistent performance. She wasn't the best shooter in the group, but she was holding her own against some of the military's most skilled marksmen. More importantly, she was learning, adapting, and improving with each exercise. The Barrett .50 caliber rifles remained locked in their cases, waiting for the advanced exercises that would separate the qualified from the merely competent. Rodriguez knew that the real challenges lay ahead, but Sarah Chun had earned her right to face those challenges through the same criteria that applied to every other participant: demonstrated shooting ability and professional military competence. The unlikely woman with the eye patch had announced her presence not through words or explanations, but through the universal military language of performance under pressure. Tomorrow would bring greater challenges, longer distances, and the ultimate test of precision marksmanship. But today, she had proven she belonged on this firing line among these elite warriors. The morning shadows had shortened, the initial skepticism had given way to professional acceptance, and Sarah Chun had taken her first steps toward a confrontation with one of the military's most demanding weapon systems. The Barrett .50 weighted in its case 30 pounds of precision engineering that would soon test every skill she had developed during her journey from civilian to soldier to the unlikely marksman who had captured the attention of America's elite warriors. The story of how Sarah Chun came to wear an eye patch began 3 years earlier on a dusty road outside Kandahar, Afghanistan. At that time, she was Specialist Sarah Chun, a supply convoy driver with the 142nd Military Police Company, Army National Guard. Her military career had started not from childhood dreams of combat glory, but from practical necessity, college tuition assistance, and job training that her working-class family couldn't otherwise afford. Growing up in Sacramento, California, Sarah had been the daughter of immigrants who'd built a small restaurant business through 18-hour workdays and unwavering determination. Her parents, David and Lin Shun, had arrived from Taiwan with engineering degrees that weren't recognized in the United States, forcing them to start over in an industry where language barriers mattered less than work ethic and attention to detail. The Golden Dragon restaurant became their life, consuming every available hour and dollar as they struggled to establish financial stability in their adopted country. Sarah's childhood had been shaped by the rhythm of restaurant life. Early mornings helping prep vegetables before school, afternoons doing homework in corner booths while her parents served customers, and weekends learning the business that represented her family's entire future in America. She'd grown up bilingual, culturally adaptable, and with a work ethic that impressed even her demanding parents. But college seemed financially impossible until a National Guard recruiter visited her high school during her senior year. The promise was straightforward: serve 1 weekend per month and 2 weeks each summer, complete basic training and military occupational specialty school, and receive significant tuition assistance plus job training in logistics management. For an 18-year-old whose parents worked 7 days a week just to maintain their small business, the National Guard offered a path toward higher education that wouldn't burden her family financially. Basic training at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, had been challenging but manageable. Sarah's compact frame and quiet determination served her well during the physical challenges, while her natural organizational skills made her a standout in the classroom portions of training. She'd chosen military police as her specialty partly because of the civilian career applications, and partly because the recruiter had emphasized the importance of the MP role in modern military operations. Her first deployment to Afghanistan came during her junior year of college, interrupting her business administration studies, but providing real-world experience that no classroom could offer. The 142nd MPs were assigned primarily to convoy security and base protection duties, critical but typically routine missions that involved more vigilance than direct combat. Sarah had adapted well to military life overseas, developing friendships with her fellow soldiers and gaining confidence in her ability to handle the stress and responsibility of military operations. The mission that changed everything began like dozens of others she'd completed successfully. A supply convoy from Bugram Airfield to Forward Operating Base Chapman, carrying everything from ammunition to mail to fresh food for troops stationed at the remote outpost. Sarah was driving the third vehicle in a 5-truck convoy, responsible for a heavily loaded cargo vehicle that represented weeks of planning and thousands of dollars in critical supplies. The route had been traveled safely many times before, but Afghanistan's security situation remained unpredictable. Roadside bombs, small arms fire, and complex ambushes were constant threats that required continuous vigilance from every member of the convoy team. Sarah had completed this particular route 7 times without incident, but she never allowed familiarity to replace careful attention to potential dangers. The IED that nearly killed her had been placed with sophisticated timing and positioning that suggested extensive surveillance of American convoy patterns. Hidden beneath what appeared to be routine road debris at a choke point where the highway narrowed between rocky hills, the device was triggered when the lead vehicle had passed while the main body of the convoy was directly in the kill zone. The explosion lifted Sarah's 5-ton cargo truck completely off the ground, flipping it twice before it came to rest on its side in a drainage ditch beside the road. The blast occurred at 2:47 p.m. local time on October 15, 2021, and in the span of seconds transformed her from a confident young soldier into a critically injured casualty fighting for survival in a hostile environment. Consciousness returned gradually, filtered through pain and confusion that made it difficult to understand what had happened. Her first clear thought was that something was wrong with her vision. The left side of her visual field was completely dark, while the right side showed a chaotic mixture of overturned equipment, scattered supplies, and dust-filled air. She could hear voices shouting commands and calling for medical assistance, but the sound seemed distant and distorted. Staff Sergeant Maria Gonzalez, the convoy's senior NCO, had been in the lead vehicle and immediately organized the response to the attack. Her first priority was accounting for all personnel and providing immediate medical aid to anyone injured in the explosion. When she reached Sarah's overturned vehicle, she found her conscious but clearly disoriented, with blood streaming down the left side of her face from what appeared to be serious head trauma. "Chun, can you hear me? Stay with me, soldier. We're going to get you out of there." Gonzalez's voice cut through the confusion, providing the anchor of authority and competence that Sarah desperately needed in that moment. The extraction from the overturned vehicle required careful coordination to avoid causing additional injury. Sarah's left eye had been severely damaged by flying debris, metal fragments from the vehicle's dashboard that had been turned into projectiles by the force of the explosion. The medical assessment would later reveal that the eye had been damaged beyond repair, requiring immediate evacuation and ultimately surgical removal to prevent life-threatening infection. The helicopter evacuation to the military hospital at Bagram took 18 minutes, during which Sarah drifted in and out of consciousness while medics worked to stabilize her condition. The flight medic, a seasoned professional who'd seen hundreds of combat casualties, noted in his report that Sarah remained responsive and cooperative throughout the evacuation despite obvious pain and the traumatic nature of her injuries. At Bagram's hospital, the initial surgery focused on immediate life-saving measures rather than attempts to preserve the damaged eye. The military surgeons, experienced in trauma medicine from years of treating combat injuries, made the difficult but necessary decision to remove the eye to prevent infection that could have threatened her life or spread to her remaining vision. Sarah's first clear memory after the explosion occurred 3 days later when she awakened in the intensive care unit with her parents sitting beside her bed. They had flown from California as soon as they received notification of her injuries, leaving their restaurant in the hands of employees while they focused entirely on their daughter's recovery. The conversation about her future began immediately, not with doctors or military officials, but with her parents in the quiet ICU room. Lin Shen held her daughter's hand while explaining the medical situation with the directness that had carried the family through previous crises. The eye was gone, reconstructive surgery would be needed, and the doctors had indicated that her military career was likely over. "We want you to come home," David Chen said quietly. "Focus on your recovery, finish school, help us with the restaurant. You've served your country. You've done enough." But as Sarah listened to her parents' concerns and the medical staff's explanations about her future limitations, she realized that losing her eye had not diminished her sense of purpose or her identification with military service. If anything, the injury had clarified her commitment to the profession she'd initially chosen for practical reasons but had grown to value for deeper personal fulfillment. The recovery process in the United States took 6 months, involving multiple surgeries, physical therapy, and adaptation training for monocular vision. Sarah learned to navigate depth perception challenges, developed new techniques for tasks that had previously required binocular vision, and slowly rebuilt her confidence in her physical capabilities. The most difficult aspect of recovery wasn't physical. It was the assumption by family, friends, and even some military personnel that her injury necessarily meant the end of her military career. The Medical Evaluation Board initially recommended a disability retirement, suggesting that her monocular vision made her unsuitable for continued military service. Sarah's response was to request evaluation for retention and return to duty. She argued that her injury didn't affect her ability to perform many military occupational specialties, and that military service included numerous roles that didn't require perfect vision. The process of fighting for the right to continue serving took almost as much determination as her physical recovery. The breakthrough came when she connected with a veterans advocacy group that specialized in helping disabled service members remain on active duty. Through this organization, she learned about other soldiers who had successfully continued their careers despite significant injuries. More importantly, she discovered that the military's policies on vision requirements varied significantly depending on specific job assignments, and that there was precedent for accommodating soldiers with monocular vision in certain roles. The key was demonstrating that her remaining capabilities exceeded the minimum requirements for her chosen military occupational specialty. Sarah threw herself into this challenge with the same determination that had carried her through basic training and deployment. She completed additional training courses, earned certifications in logistics management, and, most importantly, taught herself to shoot. The shooting began as practical necessity, demonstrating to the medical evaluation board that she could still meet basic military marksmanship requirements. But what started as an accommodation exercise gradually evolved into something more significant. Sarah discovered that her monocular vision, rather than being purely a limitation, offered certain advantages for precision shooting. Without the potential for eye dominance conflicts that sometimes affected shooters with binocular vision, her single eye provided consistent and unchanging sight alignment. The concentration required to compensate for depth perception limitations actually enhanced her focus and attention to detail during shooting activities. Most surprisingly, the mental discipline she developed during her recovery process translated directly into the patient, methodical approach that characterizes successful marksmen. Working with a civilian shooting instructor who specialized in adaptive techniques for disabled shooters, Sarah developed modified shooting positions and aiming techniques that maximized her remaining capabilities. Within 6 months, her shooting scores exceeded the minimum requirements not just for basic military qualification, but for advanced marksmanship programs. The medical evaluation board's final decision took nearly a year, during which Sarah remained in a kind of administrative limbo, not fully separated from the military, but not cleared for normal duties either. She used this time productively, completing her college degree through online courses and continuing her shooting practice with increasing dedication and success. When the board finally ruled in her favor, allowing her to continue military service with specific accommodations and limitations, Sarah was ready with a career plan that played to her strengths rather than simply working around her limitations. She requested assignment to logistics and supply operations, areas where her organizational skills and attention to detail were valuable assets, while maintaining her commitment to advanced marksmanship training as a secondary specialty. The transition back to active National Guard duty required adjustments from both Sarah and her unit. Some fellow soldiers initially treated her with the careful consideration typically reserved for fragile things, while others questioned whether someone with significant combat injuries should continue serving. Sarah addressed both responses through consistent professional performance and by demonstrating that her injury had not diminished her value as a soldier or her commitment to military excellence. The shooting competitions began almost accidentally. Sarah's unit commander, impressed by her determination during the retention process, encouraged her to participate in National Guard marksmanship competitions as a way of representing their unit and demonstrating the capabilities of soldiers who had overcome significant challenges. Her first competition results were respectable, but not exceptional, good enough to earn recognition, but not sufficient to attract broader attention. But Sarah approached competitive shooting with the same methodical improvement process that had characterized her recovery. She studied ballistics, practiced constantly, and sought out advanced training opportunities whenever they became available. Each competition taught her something new about precision marksmanship, and her scores steadily improved as she developed techniques specifically adapted to her situation. The invitation to the Advanced Marksmanship Training Program at Coronado came after she placed third in a regional National Guard shooting competition, demonstrating accuracy that exceeded many fully sighted competitors. The program's selection criteria focused on demonstrated shooting ability rather than medical history, and Sarah's scores qualified her without any special considerations or accommodations. Standing on the Coronado firing line with an eye patch and a determination forged through trauma, Sarah represented something more significant than just another student in an advanced training program. She embodied the principle that military capability couldn't be measured purely through traditional standards, that adaptation and determination could overcome limitations that might seem insurmountable, and that the path to elite performance sometimes required traveling through darker territories than most people could imagine. The Barrett .50 caliber rifle remained locked in its case, waiting for students who could demonstrate the skill and mental discipline required to handle one of the military's most demanding weapon systems. Sarah Chun had earned her place in line for that test not through sympathy or accommodation, but through the same standard that applied to everyone else, demonstrated excellence under pressure. Tomorrow would bring the advanced exercises that would determine who among these elite warriors was qualified to handle the Barrett's awesome power. Sarah was ready for that test, carrying the hard-won knowledge that sometimes the greatest strength comes from learning to succeed despite circumstances that others might consider impossible to overcome. Day 2 of the Advanced Marksmanship program began before dawn with the kind of California coastal fog that made long-range shooting particularly challenging. The marine layer had rolled in overnight, creating visibility conditions that would test every aspect of the student's technical knowledge and shooting skills. Master Chief Rodriguez had deliberately scheduled the day's most demanding exercises during these atmospheric conditions, knowing that real-world precision shooting often occurred under far from ideal circumstances. The morning briefing took place in the range classroom, where detailed weather data and ballistic calculations covered whiteboards with the complexity of graduate-level physics problems. Wind speed and direction measurements from multiple points along the range, barometric pressure readings, humidity levels, and temperature gradients all contributed to the environmental puzzle that long-range marksmen had to solve before sending bullets toward targets positioned at distances where tiny calculation errors would result in complete misses. "Today we're shooting at 1,000 yards, Rodriguez announced to the assembled group. At this distance, a bullet drop of over 27 feet, wind drift that can measure in yards rather than inches, and atmospheric conditions that change continuously throughout the day. Your shooting fundamentals from yesterday are just the foundation. Today we're testing your ability to read conditions, calculate solutions, and execute precision shots when the environment is working against you." Sarah listened to the technical briefing with the focused attention she brought to every aspect of her military training. The mathematical calculations involved in long-range shooting appealed to the analytical skills she developed during her business studies, while the challenge of adapting to changing conditions matched the problem-solving mindset that had carried her through the recovery process after her injury. Lieutenant Commander Sullivan, the SEAL sniper instructor, took over the briefing to explain the specific challenges of shooting in marine layer conditions. Fog and humidity affect bullet trajectory in ways that aren't always predictable from textbook formulas. Visibility will change throughout the morning as the sun burns off the marine layer. You'll need to constantly reassess conditions and adjust your calculations accordingly. The group moved to the firing line as the first gray light of dawn began revealing the landscape beyond the range. The 1,000-yard targets were barely visible through the morning fog, appearing as dark shapes that seemed to fade and reappear as atmospheric conditions shifted. The challenge wasn't just hitting targets at this extended range. It was hitting targets that could barely be seen under conditions that would test the limits of optical equipment and shooting skill. Sarah's equipment setup took longer than the previous day, partly because of the additional calculations required for the extended range, and partly because her shooting techniques required more precise attention to equipment details than shooters with binocular vision. She checked and rechecked her scope settings, verified her range estimation using multiple methods, and paid particular attention to wind reading techniques that relied heavily on visual observation of environmental indicators. The SEAL and Marine snipers began their shooting with the confidence that came from extensive training in precisely these kinds of challenging conditions. Their pre-shot routines were efficient and practiced, and their first-round hits demonstrated the kind of shooting skill that separated elite military marksmen from merely competent recreational shooters. The targets at 1,000 yards were small enough that successful hits required not just accurate shooting, but precise calculation of all the environmental factors affecting bullet trajectory. Rodriguez observed each shooter through high-powered spotting scopes, calling out impact points and wind corrections while maintaining detailed records of performance under these demanding conditions. The morning fog created an additional challenge for observation. Even with sophisticated optical equipment, determining exact impact points required careful attention and experience reading atmospheric disturbances. When Sarah's turn came, she approached the firing line with the methodical preparation that had become her trademark. Her pre-shot routine included additional steps for verifying target identification through the fog and confirming her atmospheric calculations using backup methods. The other students had begun to recognize these extended preparations not as uncertainty, but as the thorough approach of someone who couldn't afford to waste shots or rely on quick corrections. Her first shot at 1,000 yards struck the target, but not in the center ring where the best scores were awarded. Rodriguez marked the impact point and called out a wind correction that would help adjust for the constantly changing atmospheric conditions. Sarah absorbed the feedback, made the necessary scope adjustment, and prepared for her second shot with the same careful attention to detail. The second shot was significantly better, striking within the high-scoring zone and demonstrating her ability to process feedback and make effective adjustments under pressure. Rodriguez noted the improvement with professional satisfaction. This was exactly the kind of learning progression that indicated genuine shooting potential rather than lucky beginnings. Good adjustment, Chun. You're reading the conditions well. His comment was brief but significant, delivered with the same tone he used for the SEALs and Marines who were exceeding expectations. As the morning progressed and the Marine layer began to dissipate, the shooting challenges intensified rather than decreased. Changing atmospheric conditions meant that calculations that had been accurate an hour earlier were no longer valid. Students had to continuously reassess environmental factors and adjust their shooting techniques accordingly. This was the kind of adaptive thinking that separated true marksmen from shooters who could perform well only under static conditions. During the mid-morning break, Rodriguez found himself in conversation with Sullivan about the day's observations. The SEAL instructor had been watching Sarah's performance with particular interest, not because of curiosity about her injury, but because of recognition that her shooting techniques represented sophisticated adaptations to challenging circumstances. She's not shooting like someone with compromised vision, Sullivan observed quietly. She's shooting like someone who's developed advanced techniques for dealing with environmental challenges. Her pre-shot routine is more thorough than most of my advanced students. Rodriguez had reached similar conclusions. Sarah's shooting wasn't characterized by the hesitation or compensation techniques that might be expected from someone working around a significant limitation. Instead, her approach suggested that she had developed shooting methods that maximized her remaining capabilities while addressing environmental challenges that affected all precision marksmen. The afternoon exercises introduced moving targets and time pressure scenarios that tested different aspects of marksmanship skill. These scenarios simulated the kind of tactical shooting situations that military snipers might encounter in field operations, where perfect atmospheric conditions and unlimited preparation time were luxuries that didn't exist. Sarah's performance in the tactical scenarios revealed another aspect of her shooting development that impressed the instructors. Her target acquisition under time pressure was actually faster than many of the other students, suggesting that the concentrated focus required for monocular vision shooting provided advantages in high-stress situations where tunnel vision and precise attention to detail were critical factors. The day's final exercise involved night shooting using night vision equipment, a challenge that tested equipment familiarity, technical knowledge, and the ability to maintain shooting fundamentals under completely different visual conditions. Night shooting required different calculation methods, alternative techniques for reading environmental conditions, and adaptation to the unique characteristics of night vision optical systems. For most shooters, night vision equipment represented a significant change in their visual relationship with targets and environmental conditions. For Sarah, the transition to night vision actually reduced some of the visual challenges she faced during daylight shooting. The monocular nature of most night vision systems matched her existing visual situation, and her experience adapting to single-eye shooting provided advantages when working with equipment that naturally created similar visual conditions. Her performance during the night shooting exercise was exceptional, demonstrating accuracy that exceeded several of the other students and earning recognition from both Rodriguez and Sullivan. The night vision shooting revealed that Sarah's adaptations to her injury had prepared her for shooting challenges that extended far beyond simply working around a missing eye. Outstanding shooting, Chun. Your night vision work is some of the best I've seen from any student. Rodriguez's praise was earned and deserved, based on demonstrated performance rather than encouragement for effort. As the second day concluded, the group had been reduced from 23 students to 19. For participants had been eliminated based on shooting performance that didn't meet the program's standards for advancement to the final day's Barrett .50 caliber qualification. The elimination wasn't punitive. These were skilled military marksmen whose shooting abilities were exceptional by normal standards. But the advanced program demanded performance levels that separated the very best marksmen from merely excellent shooters. Sarah had not only survived the cut, but had earned scores that placed her among the top performers in the group. Her consistency under varying conditions, her ability to make effective adjustments based on instructor feedback, and her performance during challenging night vision scenarios had demonstrated shooting skills that exceeded the minimum standards for advancement. The Barrett .50 caliber qualification would take place the following day, representing the culmination of the entire program and the ultimate test of precision marksmanship skill. The weapon itself was legendary among military marksmen, a 30-pound rifle that fired ammunition capable of disabling vehicles or engaging targets at distances exceeding 2 miles. The qualification standards for the Barrett were correspondingly demanding, requiring demonstration of accuracy, consistency, and mental discipline that few shooters could achieve. Rodriguez spent the evening preparing the final day's exercises and reviewing the performance records of each remaining student. Sarah's scores throughout the 2-day program had been consistently strong, showing improvement with each exercise and demonstrating the kind of learning progression that indicated genuine shooting talent rather than fortunate beginnings. More significantly, her approach to the challenges of long-range precision shooting suggested that she understood the mental and technical aspects of marksmanship at a level that exceeded many shooters with years of experience. Her injury had forced her to develop shooting techniques that emphasized calculation, preparation, and mental discipline over quick reflexes or intuitive shooting methods. The Barrett qualification would test every aspect of these hard-won skills. The weapon's size, weight, and power demanded perfect shooting technique and mental preparation. The qualification scenarios would include extended-range shots, time-pressure situations, and environmental challenges that tested not just shooting ability but the complete integration of technical knowledge, physical skill, and mental discipline. Sullivan approached Rodriguez as they secured equipment for the evening. "What do you think about her chances tomorrow?" Rodriguez considered the question carefully. Sarah had earned her place in the final.